Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you back to the Dynamic Decisions podcast, where we explore the strategies that drive successful decision-making in the world of business and economic development. Why? Because the best decisions come from great conversations. I'm your host, Tisha Cable, CEO of C Model Data, and today we have a rare hybrid leader who speaks fluently in both public policy and commercial real estate languages. Her name is Kristen. She's the founder and principal of Redevelopment Resources, which is a Madison-based community impact and economic development consulting firm that she's led for over 16 years. She is a recognized authority in tax increment financing, grant funding, and public-private partnerships. So, Kristen, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show. I'd love for you to tell the audience more about you and more about the work that you're doing every day.
Thank you, Tisha. It's great to be here. I feel like you should cue the applause line there. You have high energy. It's been quite a ride the last, I'd say, it's over 17 years now of owning our Redevelopment Resources. But I started out in the city of Wausau, learning as much as I possibly could about economic development. And at some point I decided, I want to share this goodness with others and try to sprinkle that economic development goodness across wherever I can. And so we've had the great opportunity to work with communities across the Midwest primarily, although we've had contracts in New York and Colorado and North Carolina. So, but really focused in, I was given advice when I first started to stay close to home. And so, there's enough work in this area to keep us really busy. So it's been a lot of fun. What I enjoy most about the work that we do is helping other people, whether it's a community or a developer, solve a problem. Whether it's a raw piece of real estate or a strategy or whatever, if we can help them solve that problem, that's where I shine.
Love that. And problem solving is my secret sauce too. So I get how exciting that can be. So you spent 7 years as a municipal economic development director in Wausau. Is that how you say it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So then you transitioned to the consulting side to advise dozens of municipalities. Can you walk me through that specific pivot? Did you learn things from the inside of City Hall that changed how you approach consulting with cities right now? And then,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I learned a lot, and I was empowered when I was at City Hall. I was given minimal direction and said, just run with it. In fact, one time I was asked by my boss, he said, do you know what an IRB is? And I said, no. And he said, read the state statute and then come and tell me what it is. So I did that. And he handed me a FedEx envelope and he said, okay, do this one. I was like, what? Okay. I did it. And I appreciated having that trust. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about tax increment financing. And before I left the city, I was managing their TIF districts from the economic development side. Of course, we had a very capable finance department that managed that end of it. But I had then written project plans for a couple of districts and amended one and then recruited businesses into those districts. Did deals from both sides of the table, representing the business and also representing the city. I had the opportunity to project manage the construction and then operation of a business incubator. And that was that whole entrepreneurial side, but also project management. I had a hard hat. I was on the construction site. Had some really rich experiences. Loved the business recruitment aspect of it. Found out how hard it was. I was told by an attorney early on that if I could recruit Olive Garden and Old Navy to the community, this was in the early 2000s, that I could be done. And I took those assignments very seriously. They ended up coming to the community, not to our municipality, but to an adjacent municipality where all the big boxes were. But I learned a lot along the way, just learned a ton. So the pivot then, I left the city for 2 years and worked for a corporate private company that recruited me away. I had helped recruit them to the city.
Oh,
and
wow.
then they said, why don't you come work for us doing our business development? And I did that for a couple of years. I learned a ton about large hydraulic cylinders, which I don't know if I'll never need that information again, but I learned a lot about ISO 2000 or 9000 or whatever it was at the time, the ISO certification. Learned a lot about government contracting there. We did some contracts with the Navy and with the Army Corps of Engineers. And so I learned a lot that I also could carry with me. And then at the point when the company was being sold to a private equity firm, they eliminated me and all of my employees from that large hydraulic cylinder company. And at that point, I partnered up with some friends and colleagues that were older and wiser than I was. And we had this fun analogy. They had experience in planning and real estate. And they said, we just want to play. And I said, well, I want to work hard and make a lot of money. And so my analogy with them was that they were the rodeo ponies and I was the plow horse. I did the work and they came in and helped with their guidance and their mentorship and their wisdom. And we did a few projects together and then they happily retired and we've been going strong ever since. So the pivot was guided, but the first contract was funny. I ended up administering CDBG for a community in Wisconsin and I quoted a rate, an hourly rate to them, and I think they thought it was pretty low at the time because after a little while, the director came to me and said, you could raise your rate a little bit. So after that, we were a little more focused on a value for service. And that was just the early beginning. I would say it took about 2 years to get the wheels really spinning. And we've done some really fun projects across the country. And I've helped a lot of developers along the way, not just public sector clients. I've advised private sector clients on gathering incentives and building that capital stack. And to the point where in 2019, I was thinking, wow, I should maybe be doing this for myself, looking for buildings to rehab and redeveloping them myself. And I did pivot there again and found an old building in Iowa, small town in Iowa. Wow. That became my first adaptive reuse project, my first redevelopment project myself. So
I love that the professional led to the personal, right? It was like you learned enough to go, oh, I should participate in this part of the economy as a person living in it, as opposed to just a person doing the development work. And I love your concept around value for service, because I think that that's extremely important. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about tax increment financing, right? We know that this is legendary in economic development circles. One, because it's got power, but it also has a lot of complexity. So TIFs, as we call them, they're contentious because they relocate tax revenue and they require cities to make a much longer term financial commitment, and they may not have certain outcomes, right? The outcomes may be uncertain. So maybe give me an example of a TIF district that you've structured and what made it work and what were the pitfalls that you may have had to navigate, and how do you help city councils to understand the trade-offs and the risks of this without just overselling an opportunity?
Sure. So in Wisconsin, I understand TIF best in Wisconsin. I've learned about TIF in Iowa, Minnesota, and Illinois as well. But in Wisconsin, when you write the project plan, there are many different options for types of costs you can put into the plan. And I always advise communities to make sure they're using that admin category to help fund organizations that might be doing economic development. You could also use the marketing category, but that's going to help turn increment and revenue into guiding the operation that's going to be recruiting more businesses to the TIF district. It is what I call TIF a self-funding mechanism, because the business is paying the property taxes and that's what's funding the district. So I guess I would advise communities to make sure they have every tool built into their project plan up front that they possibly can. Also, I've seen some districts that are restrictive, and in Wisconsin, TIF is like the only tool we have to negotiate and to really it is one of the very few tools that we have in Wisconsin, whereas other states have big war chests where they can use sales tax revenue or other revenue that we don't get to use in Wisconsin. So we have to be creative and we have to think outside the box. I get nervous when communities structure tight regulations or guidelines around their TIF, because then they're not able to be flexible with it. And I don't necessarily agree with if you set a precedent, because that's a sticky place to go, because every deal is different. It's highly likely you're not going to have two identical deals come across your plate. And if you do, the business may or may not need the same thing. When I work with communities and clients seeking tax increment financing, I just get really disappointed when someone comes and says, I want to do this development in your community. What can you do for me? I always say, what do you need? If you can't show what you need and where the gap is, then you need to go do some more work on your pro forma and show the gap, really prove it to us. So there's a protection built in there for every community you're not going to want to give more than the project will support to begin with.
That's right. That's right.
And push back on the developer to the point where they need to have their own skin in the game.
Yes.
And so there are built-in protections along the way. I think pay-as-you-go or developer-funded TIF in Wisconsin is a good tool to protect communities. The developer pays their property taxes, and then they get a rebate back for a portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it allows the community to keep a share of that revenue to put it to use in other places or for marketing or for admin. We've also advised communities to start revolving loan funds with TIF increment so that money can keep working in the community long after the district closes. There are many ways, creative and productive ways to use TIF while protecting the other taxing jurisdictions. What those taxing jurisdictions are saying when they agree to a tax increment district is, okay, we give you permission to use this revenue for your needs before we will take any of it because we know none of this development will happen without this tool. And there is a way to prove that. You just make sure the developer's pro formas are reviewed and then keep the goals of the community in mind. You might have to change your parameter. Maybe this project, you're going to only approve of 15% of all project costs. Maybe in this one, you might need to approve an incentive worth 25% or more because you want the development that badly as a community. So I guess my advice on TIF is stay flexible, make sure the protections are there for you, and be open about everything and make sure the developer shows up with the right information.
So good. Thank you for sharing that. I like the level of detail that you've gone into there. So if someone is kind of like trying to actually measure, they'd be able to do that. So that's super useful. One of the things that you've built in your consulting practice is stuff around capacity building and public education and really helping elected officials to understand economic development metrics and project value, as you mentioned above. So that's a very, specific type of positioning for your firm where most consultants just present recommendations and expect cities to implement their recommendations. So you're actually saying elected officials need education first. Can you tell us about a time when what you're teaching them? What do the city councils typically misunderstand about economic development, and how does that misunderstanding create what might be considered a bad decision?
Sure. Okay. I could think of an example. Let's just say a city has a lot of vacant lots in their neighborhoods and they want to create an infill strategy, a strategy for development that fills in houses in the neighborhood where there might be a vacant lot. It's important to educate the elected officials on why it's important to build new homes on those vacant lots. But if the neighborhood has gaps in their build out and there are holes where vacant lots have come up, why did that happen to begin with? Was it just an economic deterioration? Was it a drug house? Was there a fire? What happened to remove that house? Education is important, but then what's the cost of not redeveloping that? Right now we have a vacant lot. If we could put something there, we'd generate some property taxes and fill in the neighborhood with another family or two or three that continues to add vibrancy to the neighborhood. And then it's very important for the city council to understand there's a cost to that. It's very, very expensive for a contractor to build a single home in an existing neighborhood that fits in. Should there be guidelines around the design and the size and this, is the zoning appropriate? But there's probably going to be a gap in the pro forma here because construction is super expensive. And if you're coming into a neighborhood that has some challenges already, there might be an issue there. So informing the city council about the potential challenges and then having them weigh the desire to have that neighborhood filled back in with new homes that fit in the neighborhood versus what the risk is to leaving them vacant. That's all a process of education. I think every time we do a housing study, we want to make sure that elected officials are aware that the only way to solve the housing crisis is not just to build housing on a greenfield site, but to focus on using the infrastructure effectively that you already have in place, considering infill. It's always good to start a process like that with a good old education series for the elected officials. So we're all on the same page when it comes to making a decision.
That's good. And it probably helps to promote some continuity as well by you providing that education. So that's great. So you bridge public sector language and private sector language. Public sector focuses on like community impact, equity, tax-based sustainability. The private sector is ROI, debt service, exit strategy. So when you're in a room with both city officials and developers and you're trying to structure a deal, What's the conversation that has to happen on both sides to feel like they're getting value? And what kind of agreements do you have to be explicit about rather than allow to be assumed?
I think it's very important to both parties understand the goals of the other. Like you said, the goal of the city would be to maybe create that tax base, maybe provide affordable housing in the neighborhood for folks. The city's responsible for providing a safe environment. The developer wants the environment to be safe because they don't want their construction site to be raided by criminals in the night, and stripped of all the copper or whatever they're getting ready to install the next day. So it's important for the city to understand the goals of the developer and the challenges they might face. In light of that, I was just in a community in Illinois where we talked about the crime in the neighborhood and the fact that there are still many blighted homes in this infill neighborhood that we're looking at redeveloping. And the biggest concern of the contractor is the security of his site when they're not on site, to make sure it's going to be safe. And then what about we're building a brand new home in this neighborhood or a duplex or a triplex. What about that boarded up house that has squatters in it right across the street? So it's important for everybody to have an open mind and understand the situation from each other's perspectives. I've seen elected officials, though, be dead set. They've dug in their heels and they're dead set. We're not going to enrich a developer. At that point, my conversation pivots to helping them understand the risks that the developer is taking to just even start a project like this, the financial risk and the reputational risk and everything else, that the relational risk that they're taking to start a project in a community. And so the perspectives need to be laid out clearly, and then coming at it with how can everybody win in this situation? How can we create a solution that creates what the community wants, but also provides the developer with a fair profit for what they're doing?
So good. Hey, real quick, here's a message for our audience. Since you guys are hearing all of this great detail, I want you to think about your own community's downtown or site redevelopment challenges. What gaps exist between what the cities want and what the developers can deliver profitably? We want you to share your experiences with us on LinkedIn and other social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. Okay. So one of the things that you did was you served as executive director of WEDA and sat on the IEDC board for 12 years. Those roles really gave you visibility into how economic development policy is shaped at state and national levels. So what is the most consequential policy shift that you've seen in economic development over your career? And I'd love to know how that shift has really changed what's possible for municipalities.
Wow, that's a good question. The most consequential shift in policy. I don't know if there's been a let's see. There have been consequential shifts in policy, but they don't always have the sky is falling impact that some people might think they have. So, for example, when we were worried that HUD's budget was going to be cut to nothing and there would be no money for public housing or those CDBG incentives, I think that the message is to just relax, stay steady, because the sky isn't always falling and none of those worst case scenarios have come true. We see things happen in the state of Wisconsin where we are lobbying for tax increment financing change. We had one very negative leader that was controlling bills getting to the floor and controlling the conversations. And we worked to try to get him to change his mind. And then he either didn't get reelected or chose not to run for reelection. So that problem doesn't exist anymore. So I guess my main message is patience and diligence and stay the course and keep beating the drum, but make sure your voice is heard. Make sure you show up to lobby when WEDA or any other state organization hosts lobbying days. Make sure you go and be in front of your elected officials, because telling the real stories of what happens in the districts is important for elected officials to hear. In almost every WEDA legislative day that they've had and gotten in front of our elected officials, and they've sent me into the tough TIF conversations because one of them just happened to be my representative. And I'm not afraid of having that conversation with them, because once you can explain to them what it looks like in reality, you can see their wheels turning. They may not change their opinion, but there's just always an opportunity to make sure the message is delivered. Also at IEDC, I did participate in one White House visit during the Obama administration, and we didn't meet with the president, but we met with many of the department heads. And it was very interesting to see how everyone approached national issues from their perspective locally and just shared everything that was on their hearts and minds. And you see the wheels turning, but depending on who's in office, things may or may not happen. So I think the important thing is to stay patient, stay diligent, and keep beating the drum for the very local level. I think isn't there a saying all politics are local?
All politics are local. That's what they say. And I believe it to be true. Absolutely.
So, good place to start. And if you really want to get involved, run for office or school board. School board is one of the most difficult jobs, I think, on the planet. So,
oh yeah, really difficult and really in need of transformation as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yes. Okay. So wonderful. Now we're going to enter into what I tell folks is my favorite little segment. Well, there's two parts to it now. The first part to it is I ask you about your daily decisions, your weekly decisions, and your monthly. Just one. So you get three decisions I'm interested in, and then we'll have this persona assessment afterwards. So the first one is, hey, you wake up every day and there's a decision that you need to make. What's that first decision that you make in the day that's based on the day? And then what's a decision that you make every week? And what's a decision that you make once a month?
Okay. Well, for me, it's how do I prioritize my day? What's the hottest thing I need to get done? What's the hot potato list? What can I get done and hand off to someone else or complete? Because we have multiple clients in multiple stages of the contract or the work that we're doing for them. And also private projects, my own projects. What am I doing for the redevelopment projects I have going on that someone else isn't paying me to do? So it's prioritizing. How do I prioritize my day? And like to get the phone calls and the meetings done right away. Microsoft Teams has this focus time feature that sets 2 hours on your calendar, and to your other teammates, it looks like you're busy. And so I love to use that focus time feature to focus on work that I need to get done for other clients. The weekly, I look at where I'm traveling for the week and make sure I'm prepared for those meetings every week. Mm-hmm. Meeting preparation, whether I have to do a PowerPoint or read a report or just prepare for that, see if the meetings room is ready and all of that good stuff. And then was it monthly?
Monthly. Yep.
Monthly. Well, we look at proposals that need to go out, deadlines for things like that. I started my very first job in advertising, which was what I graduated from with my marketing degree. And my first real job was in radio sales. But then in advertising, it was, all on deadlines. Everything was based on a deadline. What do I have to do to work backward from that deadline to get to where I need to be? And so when I went into the public sector, it was very different because there weren't really deadlines. There wasn't pressure to meet a goal. It was much more squishy. So I kept myself on a pretty rigorous schedule of focusing on deadlines. And so monthly, I look at, what deadlines do we have to meet and are we on track to meet those, whether it's for a client, for a grant, for a proposal, that kind of thing.
And then my last of this little part before we get into the last fun stuff is, what even is a decision to you?
Well, that's a good one. What is a decision? It's the ability to take action and move and make a difference, make an impact. I rarely get analysis paralysis. I like to just take enough information in to make a decision quickly. Indecisiveness drives me nuts. I like to be very action oriented, and sometimes we do make a mistake, but I'd rather be active and make a mistake than sitting here still trying to figure out why I'm doing something or what I'm doing. So I'm pretty forward focused. I guess going back to the monthly and the weekly decision, or I also need to look forward and see what's happening, where are we headed, any kind of planning that needs to take place on a monthly basis.
Good. Well, now you're right and ready for our decision-making style persona assessment. This is fun stuff. So I'm going to actually read out 3 question-like scenarios around different decision-making approaches. And after each one, you're going to tell me how much the way I'm asking the question resonates with how you actually approach your decisions. And you'll have a scale of 0 to 100%. Okay. But you only get 100% across all 4. And the next question that everybody asks is, am I going to get them all up front? And then I answer the question. The answer is no. It's one at a time. Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Okay. The first one is called the feeler. It's a values-driven leader. This persona prioritizes alignment with core values and mission, often weighing the human impact and cultural fit of decisions alongside business metrics. So, Kristen, when you are evaluating a potential redevelopment project or advising a city on a TIF strategy, how much do you find yourself asking? Beyond the financial metrics and tax-based projections, does this actually serve the community and strengthen neighborhood character? When you're structuring deals between developers and cities, how important is it to you that projects create genuine opportunity for residents and not just profit extraction? If a project would generate substantial tax revenue but would displace residents or compromise historic character, how much weight do you give to community impact alongside financial returns? And given your commitment to capacity building and public education, how do you ensure that redevelopment strategies actually empower communities rather than just impose developer visions on them? So how much does approaching decisions by asking yourself that kind of values-based question resonate with you?
It's not more
It's
than
not a trick question.
No, I know. I'm just trying to go, where do I want to put this? I'll say 38%.
Okay. So keep up with your math if you're going with the offside number. So 38% is feeler. That's the feeler persona. Great. You ready to keep moving?
Yeah.
The next one is called the planner. It's a strategic visionary. So this persona focuses on long-term implications and future-proofing decisions, always thinking several moves ahead and considering multiple scenarios. So when you're advising a city on long-term redevelopment strategy, maybe TIF district structure, or downtown positioning, how much do you think about second and third order effects across multiple future scenarios? For example, if you structure a TIF district that requires public subsidy today, does that create fiscal sustainability long term, or does it sort of lock the city into perpetual dependency on public investment? If you prioritize certain types of development like retail, hospitality, office, does that create economic resilience, or does it over-concentrate risk in vulnerable sectors? If downtown revitalization succeeds spectacularly, does that create affordability challenges that actually displace the very community character that you were trying to preserve? I mean, are you advising cities to build long-term economic resilience and diversification, or are you just solving today's downtown challenge in ways that constrain future options? How important is it to you that redevelopment strategies expand rather than constrain a community's possibilities? So how much does that forward-thinking, scenario planning approach to questioning resonate with how you make your decisions?
I would say 41%.
Okay.
They're all important. Both of the things that you've said are really important, but if I only have 100 to spread around, that's a challenge.
Okay. And then the next one is called the counter. It's a challenger of assumptions. So this persona naturally questions conventional wisdom and looks for contrarian opportunities, often finding success by zigging when others zag. So when you look at how most municipalities approach downtown redevelopment, they're either doing nothing and watching decline continue, or they're greenlighting whatever developer interest shows up. But you're advocating for something far more strategic: deliberate destination placemaking, creative financing, aligned public-private partnerships. How much do you find yourself questioning whether the conventional municipal development playbook is actually optimal? Do you think the reason that so many redevelopment projects fail to generate promised returns is because the cities aren't strategic about which projects to pursue and how to structure them? I mean, what if downtowns and blighted areas could be transformed not through subsidies and incentives, but through smarter deal structure and aligned incentives? Given your perspective, having led to statewide policy and advised dozens of municipalities, what assumptions about how cities should approach redevelopment could be challenged to create genuinely different outcomes? Okay, so Kristen, how much does that assumption, challenging, contrarian style of questioning kind of resonate with your process?
52%. I know I can't go over, so I'm way over. I'm trying to. Your puzzle is, yeah. No, I'm way over.
So that's.
I love that. I love that because I love to try to get communities to think outside the box, and I always tell them to dream a bigger dream for their community. So I'm at 131 right now.
That's right. You're over You're over your 100 and there's one more to go. And just because this is just a fun little game, I'm going to allow you to keep going. So here we go. So here's the next one. It's called the data driver. It's an evidence-based decision maker. So this persona relies heavily on metrics, analytics, and concrete evidence to validate decisions. They prefer proof over intuition. So, Kristen, before recommending a development strategy or structure to a city, how important is having concrete data and evidence to validate your approach? What kinds of metrics and analysis tell you whether a TIF district will actually generate promised returns or whether a redevelopment project aligns with community development goals? So, do you track leading indicators like job creation, wage growth, property value, appreciation, or tax revenue realized versus projected that tell you whether your strategies actually work? And when you're evaluating site transformation opportunities or financing structures, what analysis tells you that the project will succeed versus will disappoint? At the same time, how do you think about factors that resist clean measurement? How do you quantify whether a downtown actually feels vibrant and attracts people, whether community character is genuinely preserved, whether a TIF district strengthened or weakened long-term fiscal health? What qualitative signals from community members, from business owner feedback, from public spaces are actually used to tell whether your redevelopment strategy is working? I mean, how do you balance making recommendations grounded in financial analysis and project metrics while recognizing that some of the most important outcomes, like whether a community feels ownership and pride in redevelopment, whether downtowns become genuine gathering places versus just retail corridors, whether cities actually build long-term resilience, those things can't easily be measured by ultimately. Those are the things that determine whether your work succeeds. So how much does that data-driven, evidence-focused approach to questioning resonate with how you make your decisions?
It is important. It's definitely important because I do try to point out to people and communities. Well, I'll give you an example. We redeveloped a whole block in downtown Watertown, Wisconsin, and we recommended tearing down all the buildings on the block and creating a park. And people were screaming, "You're going to lose tax base. You're going to lose tax base." So I calculated how much tax base we would lose. Every year we were only generating $25,000 in taxes, property taxes from those properties. But there was an empty surface lot right behind that park that we were going to create that would attract a mixed use development that would probably generate over $200,000 or, $250,000. So 10 times the property value of what we just tore down. And I wanted the elected officials to have that perspective. Tearing down this tax base at this number is worth generating the new tax base that you'll create on the next site. So data is very important. So if I could, I'm already at 131. So I would guess I would say another, 30. But if I could go back, all the scenarios you presented are very important. And I think that it's important for, as a consultant, me to consider all of those in equal measure, maybe not equal measure, but I wasn't playing by your rules. So maybe I'm a pioneer or a voyager or somebody going off.
There we go. And it's absolutely okay. You did a great job. Kristen, would you tell everybody where they can learn more about you and more about the work that you're doing?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn and we try to publish our news articles on LinkedIn just under my name. But we also have our website, redevelopment-resources.com. And I'm not as focused on other social media. So come here and listen to Tisha's podcast.
Yay. Thank you so much. And for our audience, we want to thank you for tuning in. And remember, the best decisions come from great conversations. If you've enjoyed this episode, we want you to subscribe it, rate it, share it with your network. Let's keep the conversation going on social media using Dynamic Decisions Podcast. And until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose.